Ah, there we are.
Hey, Abu, how you doing?
Hey, buddy. How you doing? You good?
Yeah, it's so nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Industry legend, gotta say.
Oh man, no, thank you, dude. How you
Oh,
been? How's your day been so far, buddy?
good, good. How about yours?
Yeah, busy,
Yeah,
but good. It's one of those ones where you're like everything is happening all at once, but at the same time, it, it at the same time nothing.
of course.
It's
Yeah,
weird. It's weird. It's very very weird,
I
but good at the same time,
I
man.
can't really imagine launching a game. Like the idea of it would stress me out on so many levels. I don't know how you get it.
Yeah, it's sort of one of those ones where I'm like. Like I think I've kind of there's a level of ignorance of like, oh, this is happening. This is really happening. And like, I've kind of been like, yeah, I'm just making a game and seeing what happens, and here we are now.
Mm,
And it's like, oh crap, this game is coming out very soon.
yes.
So yeah, it's good, man.
Yeah. I mean, literally a few weeks away, right near the end. How you processing it? How's that going?
Um, it's you know what? My feelings go from like, oh my God, it's happening to like, yeah, it's happening. Like, it's great to like, this is terrifying.
Yeah,
So
totally.
I'm like very much of the mentality of like, actually, you know what? Let's just let's just enjoy it while we can.
Mm,
And because this is, these kind of elements don't you never get a first time again,
yeah.
right? And so that's something that I'm really looking forward to sort of exploring and expressing um, as we go along,
Mm,
essentially, really. It's sort of it's a very weird feeling
of
because
course.
again, like because you're just aware as well of like how difficult it is to launch a game
Oh
and
my
how
God.
difficult it is to make one. So to get to this place, like I'm so happy that we've
Yeah.
we've got here.
Mm. I mean, positive news. Everyone I've talked to about it is like super pumped. Like I have been since reveal. I've been saying like, this is the game I want to
Yeah,
review. I'm on it. Leave me alone.
yeah, buddy, is that positive or is that terrifying? Because because everyone's like, this is gonna be amazing, and then you're like, oh, I really hope it is.
Yeah. I mean, I've played the demo, so I am nothing but hopeful. I'll tell you that.
Oh, amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. Oh, fantastic.
So, tell me about the start of development. What pushed you?
Oh, man,
I know,
that's a
I know it's
great
a personal
question.
story as well.
No, no, it's a good question. I would say essentially what really pushed me was it was this feeling of wanting to tell an authentic and honest tale in regards to the journey of grief that I experienced.
Of course.
So like I feel like, a lot of the time whenever we see grief, it's always this kind of sad, quite morose, quite, quite down in the dumps kind of
Hmm.
thing. Whereas actually, from my experience, it felt more like it was almost like a wake-up call. I think
Yeah.
the biggest thing that kind of shook me was the fact that the world just continued to spin, which is a weird thing to say, but it's almost like, you know, it happened and I just kept moving forward. And I think like there was my experience was like almost like I was still trying to process it, but I had no time to because you had to get back to work, had to, take care of family. And I think as well, particularly, and I know this isn't necessarily just a male thing, but like there is something to be said about this idea of emoting that I
Mm,
wasn't necessarily allowed to do. I was
right.
supposed to kind of, soldier on and now I'm the man of the family. So it was important for me to kind of try and, you know, talk about this experience and in a way that felt authentic, but also as a way that kind of said to other people, like, hey, you're not alone in this journey, because
For
it's
sure.
incredibly isolating. And it's incredibly sort of, even though everyone will go through it in their lives,
Yeah.
it feels very lonely and very unique to you because of the experience that you kind of go through with it. And yeah, so that's really what drove me, man. That really is what kind of got me to wanting to tell this story that kind of explored this human truth um, in a way that felt like honest not only to me, but also, respectful of my father and kind of what he's kind of given me. But also that connects with other people as well on this journey as
Mm.
a whole.
What made you realize that it was gaming you wanted to tell the medium through? Because there's so many potential avenues, and you yourself have been in many of them. So what was it that went
Yeah,
games?
yeah, I'd say mainly because whenever I think of my father, I think of games.
Mm,
I think of like essentially, he was the guy who brought me into games. He was the guy who kind of, allowed me to enjoy the medium of games, because I think, especially at the time where it was almost seen as as a bad thing, or like, it's not necessarily a great thing. He was the one person who really was like, no, 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 enjoy yourself, like keep playing with it, and kind of go into this hobby. This is your thing. This is your passion. So it really just made sense to do it as a game, to make
Yeah.
it as a game. And I think also the experience that I kind of wanted to portray could only be portrayed through a game.
Mm.
Mainly because, like, I look at, like, for example, Grief and the Metroidvania genre. Like, the Metroidvania genre is exactly like Grief, in the sense that you are thrown into a world that you have no control over. Kind of are lost in it. You have to sort of, you're winging it basically, and because again, there's no kind of guide or book as to how to go through it. You're kind of discovering secrets and whatnot as you go along. But over time, you get comfortable with it. Over time, you get used to it, and that's basically Grief, man.
Mm.
So like, yeah, so that was what really sort of inspired me to essentially make it into a game rather than anything else.
Mm. I mean, and it's not just a game you've created; it's a studio as well. Like,
Yeah.
what was that like? I can't even imagine. One of them's hard enough. The studio.
Oh, buddy, yeah,
Yeah.
it's been a thing, man. Like it's one of those ones where I think, again, I felt like the only way that I could tell this story genuinely and sort of authentically is to have some form of control over what I was saying and sharing.
For sure.
And I think like that's really the big thing for me. It was really important to be in a position where I could not only craft a space that respects sort of the developers as well in creating this game and the process of it, but also respects the audience. The beauty of being, in charge of a studio is you can, for example, be like, yeah, we want to release a demo of the game and see, reception of that, and then listen to the community and act on that, right? Being able to be like, yeah, I want the game to be $20 because why not? Like, it's like, that's like, it's going to feel like a great experience, and I want it to be as accessible to as many people as possible. So like that kind of stuff was really integral for me as to why I wanted it to be a studio and tell these kind of stories, man. Like I feel like it's important to be able to tell them from an honest and authentic place.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously the story is incredibly personal to you. That's been talked about before, but I think when my first reaction to hearing it was, do you feel nervous about putting something so true to yourself out there? Like, games are inherently personal anyway. They're their art and their creations, and they always represent who's making them. But this one even more so because it's wearing that on its sleeve. Do you feel weird about that?
Yeah, yes and no. I think the yes element is because it feels like I'm giving my baby away and I'm being like, hey guys, here's my guts. Like,
Review my guts.
I mean? Like, yeah, literally, like there is an element of that. And at the end of the day, I know that it's an art piece, but there's always that element of it being very personal. But then at the same time, I don't think I would have felt, and I don't think the team either would have really necessarily have felt as strongly and driven to delivering this experience if it didn't mean so much to everyone. I think like it has been a massive sort of aid and boost as to why people want to do this and why they strive to do this and why. Because the thing is, like, starting an indie studio and being an indie developer is hard, right? It's like, you're against amazing games out there all the time. So to find the drive to kind of spark something on your own and do something for yourself it's always difficult and always tricky. So the best place to pull that from is somewhere that really means to you and something that means a lot from you. And I think that's kind of why it feels right. You know what I mean? Like, it feels like at the end of the day, and again, I understand like it's a game, everyone has opinions, and I think like that's totally cool because it's an art piece. But at the end of the day, as long as you as the artist feel comfortable and good about it, that helps, and I think like that's essentially what we were really striving for. We wanted to feel proud of this. This is a service not only for, as I said, like for the people, but also for us to in a degree, as we process our elements and stuff. And as long as we're happy and as long as we're kind of cool with it, like, we're gonna be okay.
Yeah, and you do seem happy with it. I gotta say, nerves aside, like you do, very passionate about it.
I'm excited for it, man. I think like, again, as I said before, like it's so rare that you get the chance to do something like this, you
Mm.
know, and I remember so vividly, like after announcing at the Game Awards and literally walking from the venue to like my hotel, and people just stopping me in the street and being like, "Man, that was amazing! Like,
Yeah.
thank you so much." Like, I remember, my parent or my partner or even my pet, passing away and how much it was, and like the fact that you've gone out to make an art piece, like that's crazy. It's like, yeah, it is crazy. It's crazy, but it's important too.
For sure, I agree. I mean, making a game was hard enough. It's always been difficult. No one's ever denying that. But especially in recent times, much harder. I tell you that. Even as a journalist,
Yeah,
it's a
yeah,
bit unsteady out there. Have you guys faced
yeah.
any difficulties there? Or has it kind of been smoother
No, it's
sailing?
been it's been all right, man. Like I think at the end of the day, like the important element and the important thing is just to kind of keep your head in the game.
Mm,
Keep know what you're doing, and as long as you're speaking, as I say, like as long as you're speaking from an honest and authentic place, it's almost like you're impenetrable.
yeah,
And I think like that is something that we've really kind of strived to be and strived to do. Like, and I've very much sort of trusted the universe in aiding our journey. And like, the thing is like there's so much love out there, man.
yeah.
Like, there's so much, and I think like the more I talk about this game, it's almost weirdly, even though like the press sort of junket has been quite tiring,
No, of course.
but it's weirdly refueling.
Mm,
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's weirdly like after every sort of interview, after every sort of person I chat to about this game, it's like, and I know I feel like I'm sort of like on a broken record, just repeating some
no,
elements
no.
and the same thing, but at the same time, it isn't, and it feels great, and it feels really, really cool, and I think that is because it just comes from an authentic place, and
Yeah.
like, and the thing is what's funny is authenticity can tell authenticity, if that makes sense,
Right. Yeah.
and I think like
100%.
that's essentially, been really, been really great because you can tell when people are authentically loving it
Mm.
and like truthfully sort of coming to you and speaking to you from a place of truth. And I think that's why it's almost felt like, yeah, we're just doing our own thing.
I mean, I was very surprised to see, the Metroidvania has come back in a big way recently, but I was
Yeah.
especially surprised to see, you're very known for your acting career.
Mm.
Bayek, amazing performance. I'm sure you hear it all
Oh,
the time,
thank you,
but
man.
it's just true. Um, but you're playing a character in a studio that you've created in a game that means so much to you. How was that? Did that change how you approached it at all, or was it?
Yeah, I mean, for a long time we weren't even thinking of doing voiceover.
Yeah,
I remember telling the team like this isn't going to be a voiceovered game, and then part of me was, then the team were then pulled me aside and were like, "But buddy, you're a voice actor." They're like, and you're kind of all right at it, so maybe you should think about like maybe you should reconsider. And it just made sense to do it because it's funny because even though the story is so personal, the story of Zhao and his journey and where he's at and what he wants to do is very different to where my head was at.
right.
You know, I was very much of the mentality of like, okay, it's happened. I've just got to keep going. Whereas Zhao's like, no, I want him back.
Right.
And I think like that is, jumping into those shoes and kind of playing through that way has been really interesting. Because again, like as the actor, your job is to see these different perspectives and empathize
Mm.
to a degree. So yeah, it's very weird to kind of a story that I've written that's very personal and pulled from a personal place, feeling so different to me when as a performer and kind of delivering it. It's all been a very interesting experience.
So you'd say you've managed to separate yourself from it then, like it's not too difficult to talk about and to perform in.
I think the only reason I've been able to kind of talk about it and quite comfortably is because I accepted the fact that it was a horrible situation
Of
and
course.
that I was struggling and I was in pain. I think I was avoiding talking about it in the past because it was one of those ones where I think I still didn't necessarily kind of come to a moment of like accepting not that he had passed away, but accepting that I was hurting.
Yeah.
And I think as soon as I started talking more about it, and the more I kind of accepted the fact that actually it's okay to not be okay, it made me realize that, oh yeah, I can actually talk about this and I can share this experience with other people. I can share and I could be brave enough to say like, yeah, as a man or whatever, like I was hurting and
Mm.
I was upset. Because like I think a lot of the time it's like there is this, like as I say, like there's this element of like not allowing yourself to kind of to be upset. You've just got to keep going. Or even as a lot of people say, oh, but there are other people out there who have it worse, and that's totally true. That's a
True.
totally truthful statement. But at the same time, that shouldn't necessarily negate how you feel. And I think like that's what I've been doing for a very long time. And it's only until literally like 4 years ago where I actually started accepting that actually I should be talking about this and being a bit more open about it, because there are other people who probably have gone through a similar journey than I have
Mm.
and not necessarily said anything, and it's still brewing inside them as a whole. I think, and even through the process of making this game, through the 4 years that we've spent making and building this game, I've still had to open up even more.
Yeah, of course. Do you think you've the word healed? I don't know how I feel about that, but do you think it's helped to put it out in art?
No, I think
I'd like to think
healing is a good word. I think, because again, like wounds heal and form scars, right? And
Yeah.
sometimes a lot of people think that scars are a bad thing, but no, it's there to kind of remind you that like, hey, this happened. And I think like I'd definitely say it's aided the process
Mm.
and aided the process of kind of going through it. It's allowed me to enter into a space or a phase where I can now use it creatively to inspire me to do other things,
Mm.
and elements like that, and I think like, and the thing is, it's not that it will ever fully heal. I don't believe that. I think this is something that will always stay with you. That's the beauty and tragedy, weirdly, of grief. Is this, you'll always have this thing that will stay with you. It will be the source that you will always kind of go back to. I mean, like even recently, after having my daughter, for example, it almost came back again, like this feeling of grief, because I was like, man, my dad will never meet my daughter. And
Yeah.
that's something, man. And I think like that's like, again, it's been like almost now, at the time she was, it was 9 8 9 years. Now it's 10. But even then, 8 9 years afterwards, you're thinking, yeah, it should be okay by now. But
No.
nah, man, it's still fresh.
Yeah, of
And I think
course.
like that's the thing. And I think like ultimately, but what it has allowed me to do though is like I can't even imagine what would be going through my mind and how I would almost be to my daughter if I still hadn't, processed in
Yeah,
the same way
sure.
and kind of spoken about it as the way that I have now.
Mm. I mean, you've mentioned before about how grief is intrinsically tied to the Metroidvania genre. So was Tales of Kenzera always a Metroidvania? Like, as soon as you thought about it, you're like, yeah, this is it. This is the way.
Yeah, so the story came up, like this is the story that I wanted to tell, and I wrote it down and, kind of hatched it out in my head. And then the genre followed afterwards, pretty quickly afterwards,
Mm.
because it was, for me, it's all about conveying in the best way the story through the gameplay.
Yeah.
And I think like that's why ZAU existed in the Metroidvania space. No other genre could depict what I wanted to depict, essentially. Like, for example, like a roguelite, is all about, or a roguelike is all about the death of the player rather than necessarily the death of another party to a degree. And I think like that's why, it couldn't have been a roguelike, for example. Or, you look at sort of like an RPG, it's about, and still there is elements of a journey there, but there is an element as well of like agency that the Metroidvania, it's like a mini open world to a degree that it allows you to kind of explore, and it's also quite daunting and scary. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, of
Like
course.
RPGs tend to kind of almost give you time to a degree to kind of get with it, whereas a Metroidvania kind of throws you in the middle of it and it's like, have at it,
Yeah.
you know?
Learn.
So that's why, we quickly fell into that genre quite straight, quite quickly afterwards.
Yeah. Was there any games that kind of that you said before that you're a gamer as well? Is there anything that kind of jumps to mind as like maybe not the pinnacle, but something that's gone, oh yeah, that's a good starting point.
Yeah, I'd say Ori. Ori was a big one.
Oh yes.
Oh yeah.
Good choice.
I'd say like, yeah, man, Ori was definitely one. I think Ori is a beautiful game, and
Yes.
I remember playing that actually on the Switch while I think I was doing press for Raised by Wolves, and I just fell in love, man. Like I was like, this is amazing. Like this is incredible. And yeah, I that was a big inspiration in regards to kind of leaning into that.
Yeah. One of the things that has surprised me since learning about the game is that the story's set in the past and present, right?
Yes.
So what was kind of the thinking there? What's the inspiration?
Yeah. It comes from, funnily enough, again, like for me, it was about. Okay, so I was going through this my dad's stuff, clearing my dad's stuff after he'd passed, and I discovered this book, his notebook, which I hadn't really paid much attention to, but it was just his notebook, which he wrote notes about work and everything and all this sort of stuff. Very kind of meaningless stuff to a degree at the time. But I remember reading this book, and it was his handwriting, and I remember almost thinking in my head or feeling it almost like, wow, this was him sitting here writing this, and it was almost like I was bringing him back in a weird way, bringing him back to life. And that kind of really inspired the sort of this clash of two worlds. This sense of like where my father existed, which is essentially Zuberi's father, which is in the mystical realm. And then you've got Zuberi, who is of the modern day, essentially, who kind of is very much in the sense of like the future or where I'm from. And it was almost like, for me, it felt like there's this, again, and especially with a lot of African cultures, there is a sense of trying to communicate with the dead a lot, you know, spirits existing, ancestors and all this sort of stuff. So it almost felt like that's what I wanted to do with this, and kind of also show how timeless grief is. No matter where you are, be it in the past or even in the future, it's always something that it will affect everyone, you know, that kind of thing. Also, there is an element as well of like, you know, this it's to also show the breadth and this called sort of the open nature of what I want to do with Tales of Kenzera as a franchise. You know, it can be anywhere and everywhere, I think, and that's sort of what you know, any setting, and that's sort of also an inspiration for that. But that's really why I wanted to do it. It's to kind of show this communication between father and son, essentially.
You mentioned franchise, and instantly my brain was like, "Woo!" Obviously, we're not even near one yet. Well, we are near one yet, but it's not out yet. But has Surgent Studios got anything else? It's kind of.
Oh man, we got so much stuff cooking.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome. I'd love to see it.
I'm very much. I always say this. Like I'm very much of the generation of as someone who grew up playing Pokemon on my Game Boy while watching it on TV and then collecting the cards. So like, I want to put this stories of Tales of Kenzera essentially in every format, in every other way, exploring different, you know, characters, different, you know, time frames, different sort of, you know, space. I've got a plan essentially of where I want the story to go. Like, you know, there's a reason why ZAU was the first story.
Yeah.
And there's this puzzle that I'm trying to create, and this picture that I'm trying to paint, which hopefully, you know, if you know, when ZAU comes out and it's a huge hit,
it will be.
I can continue doing this. I hope so, man. I hope so. And like, you know, if that happens, then I'll be able to. It gives me the assurance of like, okay, you have no idea what I have in store for you in the future. Very inspired by like Discworld, kind of, you know, Raised by Wolves even as well. Like all these kind of, you know, even, you know, the Alien franchise or even like Lord of the Rings and even Warcraft to a degree. Like there's all sorts of stuff that I'm inspired by to kind of show an influence in this world.
I mean, I was already excited. Like I said when I was talking to Zai that I've been checking my emails for code like every couple of hours. But you are so passionate and informed about it. Like I am so excited. I hope it's.
Oh man, I can't wait. I can't wait. I can and I can't.
It'll be good. Don't worry. Don't even worry about it. It's already good.
All right.
That was my last question, but it's been an honour to talk to you.
Thank you so much, buddy. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for taking the time.
Of course. Cool, man.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Take care, man. Bye.
Cheers, guys.